Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to Cardboard Chemistry. I'm your host, MTG Labman, and today's topic is my initial impressions of the Lorwyn Eclipsed set. It is Thursday. We are in day 4 of the Lorwyn Eclipsed spoiler season, and thought this video would go a little bit different, but I have to say, so far, seeing everything that's been released, I'm kind of underwhelmed by the set. The story, great story. Art design, beautiful art design on the card. The whole partnership with Jim Henson, the Bogart Ballad video, phenomenal. But there's just some things that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Some things that I feel like didn't hit the bar that original Lorwyn block set. So I'm going to cover those today. First off, I want to start with set design as a whole. Back in original Lorwyn block, you had elves, you had your fairies, you had your goblins, you had Kithkins, merfolk, and elves were Golgari, and Kithkin typically mono white. There was a splash of green Selesnya aspect to the Kithkin in original Lorwyn block. Elementals were 5-color, giants were Boros, goblins were Rakdos, and then, when you shifted to Eventide, there was a flip-flop in color identity. Elves went to Selesnya, and merfolk went to Dimir, and goblins went to Rule. And, seeing the new legendary creatures that they're releasing, the new Bridget and the new Sig, and those creatures that flip, they're dual color. They're Bridget Selesnya, and the goblins Rakdos, and and it's pay one, Bridget paid 1 green to flip it. I don't get why couldn't, Wizards nod back to the Eventide, Shadowmoor Eventide blocks and say, okay, let's make this, even if you make the front, hybrid Selesnya and the back's hybrid, in Eventide and Shadowmoor, the Kithkin were Azorius. Make it hybrid Azorius in the back. Make it pay to flip it back and forth. Make it pay a hybrid Simic, and make it a Bant commander. Make the goblins a June commander. Make the elves a Abzan commander. Just to nod back to those flips. I mean, there's little tiny nods to the legendary creatures like Wart and stuff with some enchantments, but I feel like there's a huge miss there. Another thing with the flipping, like what happened to the Cinders? In when we went from Lorwyn to Shadowmoor, we went from the Flamekin having full burning flames to Ash's extinguished elementals, and we don't see any nod to that. We see Ashling now go from a Flamekin to a Frocking, to flipping from fire to ice, which is great. It's cool. It's cool. But what happened to all of the things I'm seeing? Kulrath creatures that are blue when back in Shadowmoor and Eventide, they were, Rakdos or hybrid Rakdos, or red or black. That's the first qualm. I always like to try to offset something negative with something positive. One of the things that they've added, I do like that they added Convoke in Azorius. Even back in back in Lorwyn and Shadowmoor block, or Lorwyn block specifically, all of the merfolk abilities were, tap merfolk to do something, and the invoke spells give you the ability to tap down your merfolk outside of combat. So I actually really appreciate that. I really do like that. Back to the flip side, before there were harbingers. Each creature type had a harbinger. It would allow you to search your library for a creature of that type, put it on top of your library. And now there's these pseudo harbingers, I want to call them, nerfed harbingers, where you look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal a land or creature that shares a type with it, and put it into your hand. And I just feel like that's also weakening the set. Another additional weakening, just to touch on, they've released champions. That when they come into play, you behold, introducing a mechanic from Tarkir Dragonstorm. Behold was cool for dragons. Behold a dragon, but now we're behold a Kithkin, or behold an elf, which just doesn't seem as grand. It doesn't seem to really jive with the plane. You can make the joke and be like, oh look, the students that were in Strixhaven, they're like, oh behold an elf. What? There are elves in Strixhaven. So there's that, and champion was a real cool mechanic. You had creatures that didn't have champion in their name that had champion, and now everything that's spoiled so far, we see champion, the Flamekin champion, or Flamekin, or the Merfolk champion, and I just feel like that was kind of well. Flipping to mechanics that I do like, just offset the negative. The evoke combined with Encore, I think, is a really cool mechanic. I will talk about the commander set once I get through this. I do like that combo. It allows you to, bring back those creatures. I think that's really, really strong. I do like that. I like that touch. Gives you a little bit more duality, a little bit more flexibility in those cards. Flip to negative, and I apologize. I feel like this podcast is going to be a little bit more negative than it's going to be positive. The lack of champions so far, spoiled, and or lords, I should say. In Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, there were lords. You had elf lords, and in Shadowmoor you had the lieges that buff creatures of the hybrid Pentecost. So far, everything I've seen for Lorwyn Eclipsed that is a lord type effect is restricted to artifacts that you choose the creature type when they come in, and it gives that benefit to that creature type. It is not a definitive ability on, say, an elf, or a definitive ability on a goblin. It just gives this blanket card that's like, alright, choose what type of deck you're building, choose a type of deck that you're going to build, put this card in, and it gives you this benefit. I feel like that's a little bit of a cheap out in design. Granted, the cards are cool, but it just doesn't, it feels like you're not paying attention to building some nuance into the creature type, right? Original Lorwyn block elves made tokens, merfolk tapped, but now it's, hey, this card, if I make a token, I just choose, I can put this in a merfolk deck, and when I make merfolk tokens, it works, and it just feels kind of cheap, in my opinion. Like I said, this is all my opinion. Coming from somebody who started Magic during Lorwyn, it's kind of hard for me to say this, but I kind of had Lorwyn on a pedestal, and this kind of dropped it down a little bit for me. But I'll move on from that. Erased mechanics are very non-visible mechanics in the set that were in Lorwyn before, besides Champion, and that persists. I've seen one card, it's a legendary Orzhov elemental creature that the black side gives persist. Persist was a cool mechanic. If a creature didn't have any counters on it, it comes back to the battlefield with -1/-1 counter on it. And then Wither. Yes, Wither was the precursor to Infect. Infect got fixed with Toxic, but I don't think Wither was a bad mechanic. I think we see Wither on 2 cards so far that have been spoiled. One Goblin out of the Jund Precon, and there's I think today a Dragon was released that copies the spell, and then that spell gains Wither. So it's there. There's slight nods to it, but I think Wither was a fun mechanic and was really restricted more towards the cinders, the shifted flamekins, shifted elementals. But I assume because of cinders not being present in Lorwyn Eclipsed, that the Wither mechanic probably why it faded. Which I think is in my opinion, a loss to the Jund Precon. I think they could have done something better there. But moving on from there, some cards that I like. Actually, one more thing. So far, we have not had a legendary dedicated fairy creature spoiled. The new Marlin is both fairy and elf, and I feel like because Marlin is fairy and elf in Sultai colors, I have a strong feeling that we're probably not going to get a dedicated fairy commander. I feel like fairies have kind of taken a back burner in this set. We did get a new Doran. I do like the new Doran, but there again, we've removed the mechanic of higher toughness creatures that the tree folk had outside of Doran. So there's just a nod to Doran. I haven't seen really any super impactful or nod to the old tree folk mechanics from Lorwyn, from the Lorwyn block in Lorwyn Eclipsed yet. Giants also, we do have Rian's Descendant or whatever. I do like that nod. Seems like it's a decent commander. I think that one will be a pretty good creature, pretty popular brew. But with Marlin, I think power-wise, Marlin's probably, I wouldn't say the most powerful commander I've seen so far out of that legendary creature I've seen out of that is the Golgari legendary Blight Elf. I feel like that's going to be the most brewed commander out of the set, hands down. Besides Bridget, because that Bridget is going to be she's basically Gaia's Cradle on a stick. So between those two, I think they're going to be the most brewed. I do like the new Marlin, and this is going to be a leading theme into the commander decks, which we're going to talk about right after this. I feel like this set was a nod back to original Lorwyn, where even the creatures and the abilities are built for 1v1. Reasoning behind that, the new Marlin, whenever she enters, and whenever you play an elf enters, or whenever a fairy enters, opponent exiles 2 cards, and then you can play those thief deck. You can play those cards, paying mana cost equal to the number of creature control of the elf or fairy variety. But right, that is 2 cards. Elfall, if you're playing Elfall, I was a mill player back in the day. I've satiated my mill appetite by self-milling now. So, but I feel like Marlin combined with Altar of the Brood, which mills a card every time a creature enters the battlefield or permanent enters the battlefield under your control, is just designed to give Elf Ball a splash of blue and turn it into like 2-turn. I'm just gonna mill your library, which put one elf. You put one elf on the battlefield with Altar of the Brood out, and you get um, you mill somebody for one, and then you exile 2 cards from their library. So don't have to put out that many elves to deck somebody, and elves are notorious for creating more and more elves. The commander decks, we're going to move on to the commander product, and I'll start with the elemental deck. Ashling that gives all of the elemental spells in your hand evoke 4, and then you gotta sacrifice that creature, or if you sacrifice it, it creates a token, and then to keep the token around, you gotta pay 5. You gotta pay Uber. So really, really cool concept. I don't like the fact that she's 3 mana, and then for her to be 5 color, she has a 5 color activated ability. I think that 3 mana is a little too cheap. I would have much rather seen, okay, she's 5 mana, evoke 3, and pay, or keep the evoke 4, and then instead of Wooburg to keep that token, you pay 3 colorless or something like that. Just to put a little bit more restriction on it, because if you want to keep a token with Ashling, you're looking at to evoke a creature in 4, and then 5, so you're looking at 9 mana. Granted, you can reduce it, but 9 mana to do that, and I mean, granted, you're getting double ETBs, right? Because you evoke the creature, and that creature dies. You sacrifice it immediately, and then the token comes in. So it is a very strong ability for ETBs, and really good with the evoke creatures. But they're also, I feel like, it's designed more for one-on-one, because a lot of the evoke abilities are gonna really hurt, or gonna be targeted at one person. You gotta concentrate a lot of evoke abilities at a single player. So I don't know how well board state wise is gonna go, where you may need to, you have 3 opponents in Commander. Like, I don't know how well it's gonna hang with 2 other opponents. Oh, this guy just evoked out a giant elemental and hit Tim for 20 damage. We got to do something about it. It doesn't lead to, it puts a target on you, but I don't feel like it gives enough backup to deal with 2 other players. The backup commander for Ashling, honestly, I'm not impressed. I really think they could have done a much better job with the backup commander, like choosing one elemental to gain myriad at the beginning of combat. I mean, we have artifacts that allow you to get myriad, and enchantments to help you get myriad. Like, I think, yeah, you don't have to pay for it. You pay for the commander, it's out on the battlefield, but they introduced the vibrant mechanic and with different colors, and I think honestly, they would have been much better tweaking the design to have the vibrant mechanics featured instead of focusing on myriad. Yeah, myriad makes tokens, but the base commander, actually the base commander already makes tokens. Like I would have put a different concept in there just to, if you want to build the deck differently, to give you an option to tweak the deck. Like with Vibrant, you could have had something like, whenever you cast a spell that's for more than one color, for each color from one permanent you control, give one permanent persist or something like that. Or, whenever you cast a spell, if you add mana to your mana pool add one mana to your mana pool for each color among permanents you control. Something. I mean, it's a 5 mana value commander, and it's Hooper. Like, I look at other Hooper commanders, and the Dragon, and the first sliver where it gives all of your slivers cascade. Like, I feel like giving one creature myriad isn't that big of a payoff for casting a 5 mana value commander. And then we move over to the Jund precon, and I think we also experienced the same situation where I feel like it's designed more for 1v1 than it is for group play. Anti-Ool is cool. I think it's a cool concept. Blight, I'm not a huge fan of the mechanic. Like I said, I think Wither would have been better. Persist, something like that, where Blight is -1/-1 counter, which is awesome synergy. Say go back to Amonkhet and items like that. But you blighting your own creatures, right? You're blighting your own creatures most of the time in Anti-Moon. And, like, Jund already has aristocrat strategies. It already has a lot of aristocrat strategies, a lot of aristocrat commanders. You have Warbolds, you have Prosh, and so I feel like the Moon is just a kind of a aristocrat commander in disguise, right? I feel like, and it's limited to the card draw and stuff is limited, and the life loss is limited. I think it's limited once a turn, and it's just not. I mean, Obelisk Spider, right? If I want to put -1 counters, I want to put -1 counters on my opponent's stuff, right? And if I'm putting -1 counters on my opponent's stuff, I'm running Obelisk Spider to drain life, and I'm running Generous Patrons to draw cards. So, yeah, Anti-Wolf is kind of a combo, a nerf combo of those two on a single card, but like I said, I'd rather run the 2 cards than the anti. Yeah, granted, it has Ward Blight too, but yeah, you'll get somebody's gonna get your thing. You're gonna target your commander, and what they're gonna lose 1 life and put 2 -1/-1 counters on the creature. Like, that doesn't seem like that big of a burden, big of a barrier, right? We have Voja, who is insane for Ward, and looking at Antiul, I'm like, that's not bad. You know, I look at my Vren deck. Vren has Ward too. Like, I'd rather much have a mana barrier than uh, a blight barrier for Ward. So with the widespread amount of tokens, so the prevalence of tokens in Commander and in most Commander decks, 2 -1/-1 counters doesn't seem like that big of a hurdle to overcome to target the Commander. So that's my 2 cents on Pool. Probably my favorite legendary creature that has been shown is the Reaper, King No More. The backup commander to the Blight commander deck, and I really like the design. He does come in and enables -1/-1 counters. It does restrict the -1/-1 counters for when a creature dies. You can gain control of it, but it only is once a turn. I can see why they restricted it. You know, I get that there needs to be a little bit of balance. Really easy to put -1/-1 counters on things. Really easy to proliferate. If I were to build a deck from Lorwyn Eclipsed, I would build the Reaper King No More. I started a skeleton deck build of it, and I'm running into the problem that I don't like to automatically make myself the target at the table, and I feel like Reaper King No More will do that. I kind of feel like it's Turgrid Light, except instead of sacrifice, you run -1/-1 counters, and you have plenty of ways to proliferate on other people's turns, so you can gain control of a creature every turn cycle. But that's my concern. I feel like a properly built the Reaper deck that leans into the concept that the Reaper has is going to be not as oppressive as original Reaper King, where you're destroying permanents every time Scarecrow enters the battlefield, but it's going to be as similarly impressive. And a thing that players hate more than just losing a permanent is them losing a permanent while you gain a permanent. And so you killing their creature and then gaining control of it, I feel like it's going to be one of those decks that you bring to the table. Your play group may allow you to play once that night, and then they'll ask you to switch decks. So just be prepared if you build the Reaper that could potentially be what happens. And with that being said, I wish it was a little bit more positive. I'm hoping tomorrow with the last little bit of spoilers that my opinion can change a little bit. I see some cards that I like. They spoiled a new elemental today. Enters with there's 7/7 for 1 black that enters with 6/1/1 counters on it, and then when a card enters the graveyard from anywhere, you can do -1/1 counter from it. And that is definitely going into EFIT, but there's a lot of hype, there was a lot of hope and speculation about Lorwyn being the set that saves Magic from all of the fire hose that Universes Beyond is bringing. A lot of loyal Magic, in-universe believers and Universe Beyond haters. We're like, Lorwyn's going to bring the community and it's going to be a property that people are going to buy, they're going to love it, they're going to want it. Wizards is going to see a bunch of sales from it, and they're going to see that Universes Within can hold its own against Universes Beyond. And I don't think right now, from what I've seen, that's going to be the case. I mean, you look at how well Final Fantasy did last year, and you compare that to what we're seeing right now from Lorwyn Eclipsed. Even what we saw from Avatar, and I don't think Lorwyn Eclipse is gonna live up to those speculations. I mean, there are some strong cards for sure, but I feel like if Wizards doesn't do something to solidify and make in-universe that relevant and powerful, we might move to the point where we might get less in-universe at a year than we do Universe Beyond. It's already happening this year, and who's to say that once they see the numbers, hey, we have Lorwyn Eclipsed didn't do well, but hey, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did really good. Like, what's them saying? Hey, maybe we focus on the partnership that is focusing on our own IP, which I don't want to could see it happening. People may drop out of the game because of that, but ideally, I'm gonna run this past you guys. I think honestly, it's just a large amount of product fatigue. Wizards is designing more sets a year now than they have ever, and it's hard to come up with unique concepts. It's hard to rehash previous concepts. It's hard to keep things fresh. And what I think would be really fun, a really cool idea, and my opinion only. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, or drop me a message on Blue Sky. Go back to 4 sets a year. It doesn't have to be all on the same plane. I'm not saying that. I'm providing leeway. Do 4 sets a year coincided with 4 MagicCon, right? Each MagicCon, do quarterly MagicCon that aligns with a release weekend of set. That way, when you release a set, you can tailor the MagicCon to emphasize that set. In there, you have an immersive experience with that plane, with that set, that gives players a chance to join together and play the set in groups and not be individually spread out. I mean, there are people that can't attend the con. I know financially, cons are expensive, but it would allow content creators, it would allow sponsors and everything to get together, play the cards, and be able to fully experience the set, not just getting the product, or buying the product, or being given the product from Wizards to sponsor the product, but it would allow teams to actually really sit down and experience the mechanics, the set design, and everything in a much more community-based setting. than it is now. And that being said, thanks everybody for listening. I'll catch you on the next